Most of your suffering happens in front of an audience that does not exist. Not because your pain is fake, not because your fear is childish, but because the mind has a habit of turning other people into judges, then handing them a power they never asked for. A look across the room becomes a verdict. A delayed reply becomes rejection. A disagreement becomes humiliation. An unfollow, a silence. A shift in tone, a moment of awkwardness. You carry it for hours, sometimes for years, as if the world placed your life under bright lights and decided to study every flaw. Meanwhile, the world moved on. The person you were trying to impress went back to their own worries. The person whose opinion you feared got distracted by their own insecurity. The room you thought remembered your mistake forgot it before the day was over. And yet, something inside you still performs. It performs in conversations. It performs in relationships. It performs online. It performs even in private, rehearsing explanations for people who never asked for one. This is where the deepest exhaustion begins. Not from work, not from responsibility, from self-betrayal. From shaping your life around imagined reactions. From needing to be approved before you allow yourself to be at peace, from waiting for the world to confirm that you are allowed to be who you already are. The Stoics saw this clearly. They understood that the most dangerous form of dependence is not financial, romantic, or social. It is emotional dependence on external judgment. And once you see that, a harder question appears. If other people were never truly holding your life together, why have you been living as if they were? There is a painful moment in adult life that almost nobody prepares you for. It is the moment you realize that being seen is not the same as being understood, that being praised is not the same as being valued, that being surrounded is not the same as being supported, and that a great deal of what you called love was sometimes only attention, convenience, projection, or habit. This realization can feel cold at first, because part of you still wants the old arrangement, the one where someone notices your effort without you having to speak, the one where people understand your silence correctly, the one where the right relationship, the right friend, the right audience, the right success somehow settles the ache inside you and makes you feel secure once and for all. But life keeps violating that fantasy. People are distracted, people misunderstand, people leave, people applaud briefly and return to themselves. People care, but not in the total, healing, constant way your wounded mind once hoped they would. And this is exactly where Stoicism becomes more than a philosophy. It becomes emotional rescue from illusion. Not by teaching you to stop feeling, not by telling you to become indifferent to everyone, not by turning you into stone, but by teaching you a harder and more beautiful form of strength, to feel deeply without becoming governed by what is outside your control, to love without turning love into dependency, to act with integrity even when nobody notices, and to stop asking the world to certify your worth before you begin living. This journey is not about becoming colder, it is about becoming harder to manipulate, harder to humiliate, harder to derail, harder to reduce. Because the real Stoic aim was never to control other people, it was to stop other people, circumstances, praise, criticism, rejection, and uncertainty from turning you against your own character. So we begin where most suffering begins, with the strange illusion that everyone is watching. The human mind is a brilliant storyteller and a terrible witness. It can take a 5-second moment and turn it into a 3-day trial. You say something awkward in a meeting. You send a message and regret the wording. You walk into a room and suddenly become aware of your hands, your face, your clothes, your voice. Later, you replay everything. Why did I say that? Did they notice? Did I sound insecure? Did I look foolish? Did I give too much away? Did that one expression mean they lost respect for me? By the end of the night, you have built a courtroom in your head. There is a judge, there is a jury, there is evidence, there is cross-examination, there is a closing argument against your dignity, and none of it is real. Psychology has a name for part of this: the spotlight effect. We overestimate how much other people notice us because we are trapped inside our own perspective. Your mistake feels enormous to you because you were there for the full emotional impact of it. Other people were not. They saw a moment, if they noticed it at all, and then went back to the concerns that dominate their own minds. This is not depressing, it is liberating, because the prison was never public opinion alone. The prison was your interpretation of public opinion. A Stoic would begin here. Separate the event from the story. The event, you stumbled over a sentence. The story, they all think I am incompetent. The event, someone replied coldly. The story, I must have done something wrong. The event, a person lost interest. The story, I am forgettable. This difference is everything. Epictetus built his entire philosophy around it, not with abstract comfort, with ruthless clarity. We are not crushed first by events, we are crushed by the meaning we attach to events, often instantly, often unconsciously, often inherited from old wounds.
A man at work gets corrected in front of his team. One version of that man spends the week in silent shame, convinced his authority is gone. Another thinks, that was unpleasant, I'll improve the work and stay composed. Same event, different inner government. The first man made a passing discomfort into an identity. The second kept it where it belonged, in the category of events, not self-worth. This is why your mind must be trained. Left untrained, it personalizes everything. It assumes attention where there is none, hostility where there is only distraction, condemnation where there is only indifference, permanent meaning where there was only a passing moment. Think about how often this distorts your life. A woman posts something online and checks her phone every 10 minutes, not because the post matters that much, but because the response feels like a referendum on her existence. A young man wants to change careers, but keeps delaying the move because he imagines relatives discussing his failure before he has even begun. Someone wants to speak honestly in a relationship, but edits every sentence to avoid disapproval, then wonders why intimacy never deepens. An artist delays publishing their work because criticism feels fatal, even though obscurity is already quietly stealing their years. This is what the invisible courtroom costs. Not just peace, direction. Not just confidence, action. Not just honesty, a whole life. Marcus Aurelius kept reminding himself that human beings are absorbed in their own concerns. He was emperor of Rome, surrounded by power, gossip, politics, expectation, and public scrutiny. And even he had to return again and again to the same discipline. Do not let the noise of others invade the governance of your own mind. That is still the discipline now. Not make everyone approve, not become untouchable, not stop caring about all people. Just this: do not turn passing impressions into permanent chains. If you want a practical beginning, try this in real time. When you feel embarrassment, ask, what are the facts? When you feel rejected, ask, what exactly happened before my interpretation rushed in? When you feel judged, ask, do I know this, or am I imagining their interior world? When you feel yourself shrinking, ask, am I responding to reality or to an old fear wearing today's clothes? That last question matters, because many adults are not reacting only to the present. They are reacting to a much older emotional memory. The child who was criticized harshly becomes the adult who cannot tolerate neutral feedback. The teenager who was excluded becomes the adult who reads distance in every silence. The person who had to earn love by being agreeable becomes the adult who feels danger whenever disapproval enters the room. So yes, your reactions make sense, but sense is not the same as truth. The nervous system can sound an alarm long after the battlefield is gone. And if you do not learn to question that alarm, you will obey ghosts for the rest of your life. Freedom begins when you realize you've been pleading your case before an imaginary court. The next step is more uncomfortable, because even when the audience is imaginary, the need underneath it is real, and that need has a history. Very little of your adult hunger for approval began in adulthood. It was rehearsed long before you have language for it. Children are not born debating philosophy. They are born asking simpler questions. Am I safe? Am I wanted here? Do I matter here? What do I have to do to remain loved? If love was steady, affection consistent, and correction separate from worth, something stable begins forming inside the child. They learn that mistakes are survivable, that disagreement is not abandonment, that being imperfect does not cancel belonging. But if love felt conditional, unpredictable, easily withdrawn, or heavily tied to performance, the lesson becomes different. Be easy to manage. Do not disappoint. Read the room quickly. Keep people happy. Become impressive. Become useful. Become quiet. Become whatever protects connection. Many adults are still living by these instructions, not consciously, systemically. They do not ask, what is true for me? They ask, what version of me gets the least friction? What tone causes the least disapproval? What ambition will not threaten anyone? What boundary can I soften so I don't lose love? This is one reason validation feels so powerful. It doesn't merely flatter you, it temporarily soothes an old fear. When someone praises you, chooses you, texts you back, admires your work, wants your presence, or approves of your decisions, the nervous system relaxes for a moment. See, you still belong. See, you are safe. See, you are acceptable. But because that relief comes from outside, it fades quickly. And then you need another hit, another reply, another compliment, another sign, another invitation, another small piece of reassurance that you are still visible, still desirable, still enough. That's why external validation is so exhausting. It never becomes a home, only a refill station. Modern life makes this worse. Social media has turned ancient insecurity into a measurable loop. Worth starts feeling countable. Likes, views, reach, replies, reaction time, profile visits, engagement, public affirmation. What used to be a private insecurity now has a dashboard, and this trains the mind to seek emotional regulation through visibility. If I am noticed, I am okay. If I am ignored, something is wrong. If I am praised, I exist more solidly. If I disappear from attention, I start doubting my value. But attention is a terrible architect of identity. It's too unstable, too shallow, too easily manipulated, too dependent on mood, novelty, timing, trend, and projection.
The Stoics would ask a different question. What kind of person are you when applause is absent? That is not a romantic question. It is a structural question. Who are you when the post flops? When the message is unanswered? When the room does not validate your intelligence? When your effort goes unseen? When the people you wanted to impress are indifferent? When your progress is invisible to everyone but you? That is where character begins telling the truth. Seneca warned repeatedly about the danger of handing your inner state over to the crowd, not because the crowd is evil, but because crowds are fickle. Praise and blame rise and fall with fashion, fear, envy, ignorance, and mood. If you anchor yourself there, Your life becomes a weather report. Good morning, everyone approves, I feel worthy. Bad afternoon, someone withdrew warmth, I feel broken. Good evening, I received praise, I feel real again. This is not freedom, it is emotional tenancy. You are renting your self-respect from unstable landlords, and the cost is enormous. You start saying yes when you mean no. You start treating attention as proof of love. You confuse being useful with being valued. You over-explain basic decisions. You hesitate to disappoint people who do not hesitate to disappoint you. You abandon your own rhythm to maintain someone else's comfort. There's a quieter cost, too. You stop discovering who you are, because self-discovery requires friction. It requires making choices that not everyone understands. It requires tolerating moments when your path makes other people uncomfortable. It requires letting old identities die, and a person addicted to being chosen will often sacrifice truth to avoid that discomfort. A woman stays in the respectable career because her parents can admire it, even though every year inside feels like a year outside herself. A man keeps performing confidence in a relationship instead of admitting hurt because honesty feels less safe than being admired. A friend continues overgiving to people who barely reciprocate because usefulness feels safer than risking irrelevance. This is how a life slowly gets built around emotional bargaining. I will give you what keeps you close. You give me enough approval to keep me stable. But there is no peace in bargaining away your real self. The Stoic answer is not to stop caring whether you are loved. Human beings need relationship. The answer is to stop making approval the price of inner order. To stop saying, I can rest when they understand. I can begin when they support me. I can trust myself when they confirm it. I can feel whole when they choose me. No, you begin by choosing what kind of human being you want to be. Then you build from there. And yes, it's uncomfortable at first, because when you stop feeding the approval cycle, withdrawal begins. You will feel the urge to explain, to check, to please, to soften what you meant, to send one more message, to prove your harmlessness, to win back a room you never needed to audition for in the first place. Stay with that discomfort. It is not proof that you are wrong. It is often proof that the old system is losing control. If you can endure the short-term discomfort of not being endlessly approved, you gain something far greater than approval: self-trust. And self-trust changes the kind of relationships you tolerate. Because once you begin generating value from within, you start seeing more clearly where you've been accepting substitutes. Which brings us to one of the most costly confusions in modern emotional life: attention mistaken for love. Many people don't suffer because they're unloved. They suffer because they keep accepting stimulation where they need substance. Attention can feel intense. It can feel flattering. It can feel intoxicating. It can arrive fast, brightly, dramatically. A flood of messages, sudden interest, constant checking in, grand language, a person that seems fascinated by you, a crowd that responds whenever you reveal a wound, a friend who needs you constantly, an audience that lights up when you're expressive, available, emotional, useful, entertaining. It's easy to mistake this for depth, but depth is slower. Depth doesn't need to perform urgency every hour. Depth can survive ordinary days. Depth is consistent when there's nothing to gain. Depth doesn't vanish when you stop being pleasing, productive, convenient, or emotionally available on demand. This distinction matters because a great deal of emotional suffering begins when a person confuses being noticed with being cherished. Consider Daniel. For months, he thought he had found rare friendship in a colleague who texted constantly, asked for advice, shared personal struggles, praised his reliability, and made him feel uniquely important. Then, Daniel got overwhelmed,
stopped responding quickly, and became less available. Within weeks, the warmth cooled. The colleague still seemed fine, just somewhere else now, leaning on someone else. Daniel felt betrayed. But what hurt most was not only the fading connection, it was the realization that he had mistaken dependence for closeness. He had been deeply involved in a role, not deeply known as a person. This happens in romance, in friendship, in family systems, online, everywhere. When your value has been built around usefulness or responsiveness, people can appear very attached to you without actually being devoted to your well-being. They like access, they like comfort, they like the role you play in regulating their life. That's not nothing, but it's not the same as love.
Real care often looks quieter. It remembers, it is steady, it can tolerate your limits. It is not offended by your boundaries. It does not require your self-abandonment to remain warm. It wants your good, not just your availability. The Stoics were not sentimental about relationships, but neither were they cynical. They believed deeply in friendship, loyalty, and duty. What they refused was confusion. A wise person does not measure a relationship by intensity alone. They watch for character, constancy, mutuality, truthfulness, the ability to remain honorable when convenience disappears. Silence reveals this. When you stop texting first every time, what remains? When you stop over-explaining, what remains? When you stop rescuing, what remains? When you stop bending your standards just to preserve access, what remains? These moments are painful because they expose structure. A connection that depends entirely on your emotional labor was never stable. A bond that collapses the moment you stop performing was never asking for your essence, only your service. But this revelation, painful as it is also merciful because it ends guesswork. It tells you where to stop pouring, where to stop auditioning, where to stop interpreting crumbs as nourishment. A lot of adults are walking around dehydrated, thanking people for mist, and then calling themselves needy for wanting more. No, you are not weak for wanting depth. You are not demanding for wanting consistency. You are not excessive for wanting honesty. You are human. The question is whether you will keep reducing your standards to stay included in dynamics that do not feed your life. There is also an inner silence that reveals something else, your own habits. Sometimes the attention you missed wasn't even good for you. It just kept you occupied. It kept your mind from facing itself. It gave you small surges of reassurance that postponed a larger reckoning. Some people do not miss the person, they miss the interruption, the stimulation, the familiar emotional noise. That is why the absence hurts so sharply at first, because stillness forces clarity. You finally hear yourself. What have I been tolerating? Why am I always anxious in this connection? Why do I feel I must earn ordinary care? Why do I confuse unpredictability with chemistry? Why did I keep calling this love when I spent most of it unsettled? These questions are not punishments, they are doors. And once you walk through them, your entire definition of closeness changes. You stop being impressed by people who can create emotional weather. You start paying attention to who can create safety. You stop craving those who make you chase. You begin respecting those who can remain present without drama. You stop calling volatility passion. You begin recognizing peace as a higher form of intimacy. This is where Stoic discernment becomes deeply practical. Do not only ask, how strongly do I feel? Also ask, what is this feeling asking me to overlook? Because strong emotion can hide weak structure. And if you never learn that distinction, you'll keep mistaking intensity for fate. Once attention loses its magic, another difficult task appears. You have to stop explaining yourself to people who benefit from misunderstanding you. There is a form of exhaustion that comes from living in constant explanation, explaining your decisions, explaining your boundaries, explaining your silence, explaining your ambition, explaining your need for space, explaining why something hurt, explaining why you changed, explaining why you are no longer available in the same way. At first, this seems reasonable, mature even. Surely good people communicate. Yes, but there is a difference between honest communication and compulsive self-justification. Honest communication is clean. It says what is true, what is needed, what is fair. Compulsive self-justification comes from fear. Fear of being disliked, fear of being misread, fear of seeming selfish, fear of disappointing someone, fear that your right to choose requires unanimous emotional approval. It doesn't. A great deal of suffering comes from believing that if you can just explain yourself well enough, everyone will finally understand your motives and treat your choices as legitimate. They won't. Some people do not misunderstand you because you were unclear. They misunderstand you because your clarity inconveniences them. A daughter finally says no to family pressure, and suddenly she is called distant. A man stops being endlessly available to emotionally chaotic friends, and now the accusation is that he changed. A woman leaves the relationship that has been draining her for years, and the story becomes that she gave up too easily. An employee refuses to keep over-functioning for everyone else, and somehow the problem is now their attitude. When your role changes, people often defend the old arrangement by rewriting your character. If you are not prepared for that, you'll go back to over-explaining just to ease the discomfort. But the Stoic move is different. State what is true, act accordingly, and let people have the reaction that belongs to them. That last part is hard, because many people are not only addicted to approval, they are addicted to clean perception. They want everyone to see them correctly, to know their heart, to validate their reasons, to admit they were fair, to confirm they were good. This is understandable, but it becomes another trap. You cannot live a serious life if every necessary decision requires unanimous emotional approval. Sometimes the price of integrity is being misread by people who only preferred the version of you that made their life easier.
Marcus Aurelius returned often to this theme in his reflections. Do what is right as you understand it, and do not let the noise of blame or praise become your compass. He did not mean become reckless. He meant stop making your character contingent on whether others narrate you fairly, because often they won't. They will reduce you, simplify you, translate your boundary into arrogance, translate your stillness into disinterest, translate your independence into rejection, translate your grief into coldness, translate your discipline into judgment. Let them. Not with contempt, with proportion. Their interpretation is not your assignment. A practical way to test this is simple. Notice how much energy you spend trying to control the story of you inside other people's minds. That energy could build a business, heal a body, write a book, repair your sleep, deepen a friendship that is actually mutual, strengthen your attention, restore your honesty. Instead, many people spend it managing optics. How do I say no without seeming bad? How do I leave without seeming cruel? How do I speak honestly without seeming intense? How do I protect my time without seeming selfish? There is a more useful question. What is the truthful, respectful action here? Take that action, then tolerate the aftertaste. Because there will be an aftertaste. Your body may feel guilt when you set a boundary. Your mind may rehearse counter-arguments after you choose yourself. You may feel exposed after saying less. You may be tempted to reopen conversations that were already complete, just to soften the image of yourself in someone else's mind. Do not confuse discomfort with error. A person trained to abandon themselves will feel unfamiliar pain when they stop doing it. That pain is often part of recovery. This does not mean become cold or cryptic. It means learn the dignity of enough. Enough explanation. Enough defending, enough proving that your humanity is valid. There is a quiet maturity in saying, "This is my decision. This is what I can give. This is what I cannot continue. This is what aligns with my values. I understand you may not like it." And then, stopping there. Seneca wrote about brevity, restraint, and not dissipating oneself through needless talk. In our time, that includes emotional over-disclosure to people who have not earned access, and endless clarification to people committed to misunderstanding. Not everyone deserves the unedited interior of you. Not every reaction needs a rebuttal. Not every false story about you requires correction. The person who must be understood by everyone becomes governable by everyone. The person who can remain sincere without becoming endlessly defensive begins to recover real power. And once you stop spending your life in explanation, you discover something surprising. Silence is not empty. It has a use. It can become a workshop. Many people fear solitude because they mistake it for evidence. If I am alone, maybe I am unwanted. If no one is checking in, maybe I do not matter. If the room is quiet, maybe I have failed. But solitude is not always a verdict. It often is a removal of interference. Without constant reaction from others, you begin to see what your life actually feels like from the inside. This is uncomfortable at first. No performance, no immediate feedback, no quick reassurance, no distraction disguised as connection. Just your habits, your mind, your standards, your unrest, your values, your neglected inner life. This is why so many people stay busy in ways that do not truly nourish them. The noise protects them from encounter. A full phone, a full calendar, a full feed, a sequence of shallow interactions. It all helps postpone the older meeting, the one with the self that has been edited for years. But solitude, used well, is not where life shrinks. It is where life becomes legible. You notice what thoughts visit you when the room is finally still. You notice how often your mind searches for proof of value. You notice which relationships leave residue and which leave clarity. You notice how much energy performance requires. You notice that some of your exhaustion has nothing to do with workload and everything to do with inner division. This is valuable information. The Stoics were not anti-community, but they were deeply committed to inner examination. Marcus wrote privately to himself, not to entertain an audience, but to correct his own mind. The point was never image, it was alignment. Who am I becoming when no one is watching? What passions govern me? What fears distort my choices? What is mine to govern? What must I stop demanding from the world? Those are solitary questions, and they produce a kind of strength public performance never can. Because self-respect is not built by being admired, it is built by becoming trustworthy to yourself. You say you will wake earlier, and you do. You say you will stop texting the person who only appears when lonely, and you do. You say you will leave what depletes you, and you do. You say you will rest without guilt, train without applause, read without posting about it, create without announcement, grieve without spectacle, begin without permission. These are not glamorous acts. They are bricks. Each one says something simple to the mind. I can rely on myself. That message changes a person, not instantly, but deeply. A person with self-trust walks differently into criticism, into uncertainty, into rejection, into opportunity.
They are not fearless. They are less negotiable. Because the old panic, what if no one supports me, starts losing its power when you have spent enough time proving to yourself that your life does not collapse in the absence of witnesses. Solitude also sharpens discernment. When you spend time alone, your appetite changes. You become less tolerant of noise, less available for chaos, less seduced by intensity, less eager to join dynamics that cost more than they give. This is not superiority. It is recovery of sensitivity. Someone who has learned to enjoy a clear inner life will naturally begin protecting it. They will say no more easily, not harshly, cleanly. They will recognize that not every invitation deserves acceptance.
that not every chemistry deserves trust, that not every emotion deserves action, that not every lonely moment should be solved by returning to what is already proven unstable. This is what many people misunderstand about peace. They think peace is a mood. Usually, peace is a system built from boundaries, habits, self-observation, reframed judgments, physical care, truthful relationships, fewer lies, less performance, more proportion. Solitude helps you build that system because it removes the constant pressure to perform yourself into coherence. And here is the paradox. The person who can stand their own company becomes better company for others. They cling less, control less, interpret less, chase less, perform less, demand less mind reading. They can love more honestly because they are not asking every relationship to rescue them from themselves. That is one of the deepest Stoic gifts, to become internally companionable. Not thrilled by every moment, not perfectly calm, but able to remain with yourself without fleeing. And once you can do that, an extraordinary shift occurs. You stop trying to win every emotional encounter. You start learning a rarer skill: how to remain yourself when life becomes difficult. Not every feeling deserves your obedience. This is one of the great dividing lines between a reactive life and a disciplined one. You feel the urge to defend yourself immediately. You feel the urge to send the message. You feel the urge to prove your innocence. You feel the urge to retaliate, collapse, chase, monitor, dramatize, or surrender the day to one person's behavior. And the Stoic question arrives: must I cooperate with this impulse? That question alone can save years of damage. Because most emotional regret is not born from feeling, it's born from unexamined reaction. A person criticizes you unfairly, your pulse rises, your mind speeds up, you want to answer now. A person goes cold, your chest tightens, you want certainty now. A person overlooks you, your pride burns, you want to restore your image now. But urgency is often a poor advisor. The nervous system treats social discomfort like emergency. Stoic discipline retrains you to insert consciousness between activation and action. Pause. Name what is happening. Do not become the first storm. This is not suppression. Suppression says, I should not feel this. Stoic practice says, I feel this, but I do not have to become it. There's a huge difference. A man hears criticism from his partner and instantly turns defensive, not because the criticism is unbearable, but because his identity is fused with being right. If he pauses, breathes, and separates tone from content, he may still dislike the moment, but he can respond as a grown human instead of an injured ego. A woman sees that someone she cared about moved on quickly. Her first wave is panic and humiliation. If she obeys it, she reaches out from wound and gives away her dignity. If she sits with it, lets the wave move through and returns to what is within her control, the pain may remain for a while, but self-respect stays intact. This is emotional non-cooperation. The world throws invitations at you constantly. Be offended, be frantic, be jealous, be petty, be explainable, be baited, be ashamed, be reactive, be easy to steer. You do not have to accept every invitation. Marcus Aurelius kept returning to the same inner command. Choose the response that does not injure your own ruling faculty, your capacity for reason, proportion, moral clarity. External events may strike. People may insult, neglect, provoke, flatter, misread, tempt, dismiss, or admire you. The crucial issue is not whether they do, it's whether you let their behavior reorganize your character. That's where freedom lives. Not in controlling outcomes, in refusing inner collaboration with what degrades you. This becomes especially important around manipulation. People can only steer you through what you still hunger for or fear. If you fear being disliked, guilt becomes a lever. If you need to be admired,
flattery becomes a leash. If you can't bear uncertainty, inconsistency becomes a weapon. If you need closure from the person who wounded you, silence becomes control. Remove the need and much of the leverage disappears. That does not make you cold, it makes you legible to yourself. You know your values, you know your limits, you know what is not yours to solve. You know when pain is asking for patience, not action. You know when the most dignified response is delay, or brevity, or distance, or no response at all. This is one reason the Stoics practiced negative visualization, imagining loss, disappointment, criticism, delay, illness, change, not to become gloomy, but to reduce shock. If you have already reminded yourself that people may misunderstand you, fail you, leave, disappoint, or withhold what you hoped for, then when it happens, pain still comes, but panic has less authority. Preparation softens possession by surprise. Try applying this before a difficult conversation, before posting your work, before asking for what you want, before entering a room where approval once mattered too much.
Tell yourself, I may not get the response I want. Someone may judge me. Someone may be dismissive. Someone may fail to understand. And still, I can remain aligned. That is strength. Not getting the perfect outcome, keeping your conduct intact when the outcome is imperfect. There is another practice here that matters deeply. Do evening review. The Stoics valued this because the day teaches you what theory cannot. Where did I get hooked? What story did I create? What did I personalize unnecessarily? Where did I betray my values to avoid discomfort? Where did I stay governed by fear of perception? What would a stronger response look like next time? This is not self-punishment, it is self-training. A person becomes free not because they never get triggered, but because they become progressively less available to the same old patterns. Less available to begging clarity from the unclear. Less available to proving worth to the indifferent. Less available to sacrificing truth for approval. Less available to emotional theater that leaves the soul tired. And when this discipline begins to stabilize, something profound happens. You stop asking, how do I make life stop disturbing me? You start asking, how do I become the kind of person who is not so easily enlisted by disturbance? That question carries us to the deepest chapter of all. Because in the end, this was never just about approval. It was about whether you would build a life from the outside in or the inside out. There is a version of your life that only becomes possible when you stop waiting to be emotionally licensed by other people. Not approved, not understood, not celebrated, just no longer governed. That life is quieter than fantasy, but stronger than fantasy. It is built in mornings no one sees, in choices nobody claps for, in conversations you finally have, in exits you finally make, in habits you finally keep, in standards you stop negotiating, in work you do before anyone believes in it, in private integrity. This is where Stoicism becomes creative, not merely defensive. It is not only about enduring insult, rejection, or disappointment. It is about reclaiming the energy you used to spend on performance and putting it into construction. What could you build if you stopped monitoring the room so much? A body that feels inhabitable again, a mind less hooked by noise, a vocation chosen for meaning, not impression, friendships built on truth, a relationship with time that is no longer squandered and proving, a spiritual center that cannot be purchased by praise or shattered by criticism, a life that feels like yours when the phone is face down. Think of how much strength has already been wasted. How many hours in rumination? How many days in hesitation?
How many seasons waiting for closure? How many almost decisions? How many rehearsed explanations? How many emotional negotiations with people who were never going to become what you needed? All that energy can return to you, but it only returns when you stop pouring it into unwinnable campaigns. You do not need to make everyone see your value. You need to stop building your days as if their blindness is your emergency. This may mean disappointing people. Yes, the parent who preferred your obedience, the friend who loved your constant availability, the partner who benefited from your confusion, the workplace that rewarded your overextension. The old version of you that still thinks being admired is safer than being free. Let some disappointments happen. A meaningful life cannot be built without them, because if you never disappoint anyone, you're almost certainly disappointing yourself on a schedule. That is too expensive. Seneca wrote often about the shortness of life, not as a slogan, but as a challenge. Time is not merely passing, it is being spent. And one of the saddest ways to spend it is in imitation, becoming legible, respectable, digestible, harmless, and approved, while your real life waits outside the theater. At some point, dignity demands a decision. Will you keep curating a self for observers, or will you start inhabiting the only life that is actually yours? This does not require drama. Often, the transformation is quiet. You stop announcing every intention. You build more privately. You say less. You keep more promises to yourself. You ask whether a choice is aligned, not whether it is impressive. You measure progress by integrity, not visibility. You walk away earlier from what repeatedly dishonors your peace. You let relationships prove themselves instead of constantly interpreting them. You take care of your body because you live there, not because it performs well for an audience. You work on your craft because depth matters, not because the room is currently noticing. And gradually, a new center forms. It is not indifference, it is self-command. You can still love, still grieve, still want, still care, still feel the sting of loss, still hope, still enter relationships, still share your gifts, still contribute to the world. But you stop requiring the world to become your mirror before you allow yourself solidity. That is the turning point. The mature Stoic does not become less human, they become less externally governed. They can be criticized without unraveling, praised without floating away, ignored without disappearing, misunderstood without self-abandonment, alone without panic, loved without clinging, disappointed without collapsing, successful without becoming vain, wounded without becoming bitter. Why? Because the center of gravity has moved inward. And once that happens, your life gains a certain unmistakable force. Not loudness, weight. People feel it. They may not always understand it, but they feel it. The person who no longer begs the room for permission to exist carries a different kind of presence. Less frantic, less explainable, less eager to be consumed. More deliberate, more restful, more dangerous to manipulation, more available to truth.
This is the climax of the whole philosophy. Stoic strength is not power over other people. It is not making the world behave. It is not becoming emotionally numb. It is not winning every conflict or being admired by everyone. It is becoming increasingly difficult for external events to make you betray your own character. That is the victory. The insult that does not turn you petty, the rejection that does not turn you desperate, the success that does not turn you arrogant, the loneliness that does not turn you false, the fear that does not turn you passive, the praise that does not turn you performative, the uncertainty that does not turn you into someone you no longer respect. Imagine living like that. Not perfectly, but progressively. Imagine how much of your mind would return to you, how much cleaner your decisions would become, how much more honest your relationships would feel, how much energy would be released from the old labor of managing perception, how much life has been waiting on the other side of emotional self-government. This is not beyond you. It begins smaller than people think. One honest no. One day without checking who noticed. One evening without sending the message you know would cost you dignity. One uncomfortable conversation you stop postponing. One boundary you hold without turning it into a speech. One morning spent building rather than performing. One moment of embarrassment you refuse to turn into identity. One disappointment you let instruct you instead of define you. Brick by brick, conduct by conduct, interpretation by interpretation, a new interior architecture appears. And then, one day, you notice something extraordinary. You are still affected by life, but not ruled by it. You still care, but not at the price of yourself. You still love people, but you no longer abandon yourself to keep them. You still want to be understood, but you no longer build your worth on whether understanding arrives. You have stopped asking permission to become. The suffering that opened this journey was real. The overthinking, the waiting, the desire to be chosen, the ache of being misunderstood, the habit of replaying conversations, the fear of failing publicly, the temptation to explain yourself into acceptance, the panic that rises when someone goes cold, the quiet grief of realizing how much of your life has been shaped around eyes that were never really watching. None of that made you weak. It made you human, and perhaps, until now, untrained. But now the problem looks different. You can see the invisible courtroom. You can feel the old addiction to approval without kneeling before it. You can tell the difference between attention and love. You can let silence reveal rather than terrify. You can stop treating every emotional impulse like an instruction. You can begin building a life that is governed from within. This is the return Stoicism offers, not to isolation, to authorship, not to coldness, to steadiness, not to superiority, to proportion, not to a life where nothing hurts, to a life where pain no longer has the authority to rewrite your character. And perhaps that is the freedom you were really looking for. Not that the world would finally care enough, not that the right people would finally understand perfectly, not that no one would ever reject, ignore, disappoint, or misread you again, but that none of those things would be able to persuade you to abandon yourself. So here is the challenge. For one day, stop managing your life like a performance. Notice every moment you are about to explain, impress, chase, monitor, or shrink. Pause. Return to the facts. Choose the action that keeps your self-respect intact. Let discomfort exist without translating it into danger. Then do it again tomorrow. That is how freedom becomes a practice. And in time, you may discover something the anxious part of you never believed. The life you wanted did not begin when everyone finally saw your worth. It began the moment you stopped asking them to. If this spoke to something real in you, leave the words, "I return to myself." And if you want more practical Stoic philosophy for modern life, stay close.